Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. My guest today is Maryam Abolfazli. Some of you may have heard her name before as she just ran for the seat to represent Tennessee's 5th Congressional District. You may have heard her name from her prominence during the protests surrounding the Covenant school shooting in 2023. Also, you may have read her name as she is an author who penned the 2020 novel Red Red. She's the founder of the nonprofit Rise and Shine Tennessee, a mother, a leader, and so much more. We're happy that the native Tennessean is here to talk about her life, her mission, and what keeps her going. Maryam Abolfazli, thank you for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville. Welcome back to This Is Nashville.
It's awesome to be here. It's always good to be here. Thanks for having me, Khalil.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so what's on your mind these days?
The big thought is, how do we protect our people, right? Ever since I ran, I've been maintaining a kind of a community, an online community that I've tried to sort of put news on and get people as much awareness on the millions of things that are happening, try to bring to the surface the things that are meaningful and not bring to the surface the things that are just meant for distraction in terms of federal news and political news. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have reached out, which I so appreciate, which is so Tennessee to me, which is so Nashville to me, and said, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. I'm worried about the Medicaid. I'm worried being cut. I'm a federal worker. There's a lot of federal workers in Nashville and in Tennessee. So I just think about our people, all the immigrant communities who aren't even going to school, who are so terrified. It's a very interesting time to have your government be so ready to harm so many. And that's tricky. Government always has to make choices. Government always has to come down on one side or the other. It's never perfect. Someone's always marginalized in that. So I'm not Pollyanna or unrealistic about that. But this time has just felt like boom, 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 kind of slash and burn of all kinds of people in not a very humanitarian way. And so that's what's on my mind.
That's a lot. That's a lot going on. Yeah. You said after you ran, you felt this responsibility to stay in contact with your community that you built from your campaign. It's not often that people who run for office do that. What compelled you to make sure that, you stay in communication with folks?
I think it's my why. And I think my why is the same why from when on March 27th, a few hours after the tragedy hit and we were all kind of losing our minds, I said, we got to go to the Capitol on March 30th. I think it's my why for why I chose the career I did. I think it's my why for why I moved back to Tennessee. My why has always been, I've just been geared towards the personal is political, the political is personal, and how do we make the world a better place for everybody? And that journey started at some place and it's come to where it is now. And becoming a mother also impacted that in a very unique way. And so, I ran not because I wanted to be a congressperson necessarily. I definitely feel like I have something to say. I definitely feel like I have experience and wisdom to bring to that. But I ran because it was just an extension of this desire to make change for the greater good. We did that protest for that reason. I started Rise and Shine and worked with so many incredible volunteers for that reason. Still do all that work. Now I'm working with Stand Up Nashville as the organizing director. It's all the same thread. And so after the election, it would have been nice to take a time off, but that didn't feel like what we were up to. What we were up to wasn't about win or losses in a race or whatever. It was about people power and impact. And I will always think in terms of outcomes and impacts. So yes, I lost the race, but that was irrelevant in terms of here's a large group of people that feel a certain way, and they often feel isolated or alone or quieted in this part of the country. And it's time for people are seeking leadership. And so it's not the time to sit back.
Now, you have worked in the nonprofit sector for a while. Has that been most of the work in your career, working in nonprofits?
Yes. Initially, it started out internationally. I really felt like I had some sort of ability to bridge worlds. I think growing up in Nashville, Iranian American. And then I got really concerned and I've always had an economic bent to me. I just think if people are not doing well economically, then everything else doesn't matter. You can have rights, but if you can't make ends meet, sometimes the rights don't even matter, And so I focused on economic development in the Middle East, in the former Soviet Union. So I spent a ton of time there. I was clocking like 100,000 miles some years, just back and forth. Yeah. So some of those places were like home to me during that time. And then I decided I wanted to move back to Nashville, and I started working very locally, hyper-locally. I worked at Project Return, which works with formerly incarcerated folks. I worked with Millions of Conversation, which works with bridging gaps, and very much was focused on the Muslim American community at that time. Yeah, now Stand Up Nashville. I'm on the Metro Human Relations Commission. So just all these different forays into, I was the chair of Awake Tennessee, which was working at the state level. I don't know. It's just my passion. It's just who I am.
You have all of this passion for this. And in conversation with highly passionate people who work in the nonprofit sector, the topic of burnout comes up. Have you experienced?
What is that?
Okay, so you just keep going. Have you experienced burnout at all? Anything close?
Yes. So the first year, I'd say the big come out of my career was in 2003, 2004. I went with the UN to Afghanistan. We had just kicked out the Taliban, so they were hiding, and it was a really optimistic, inspirational, wonderful time to be there, especially as an American, an Iranian American. I could speak the language. They were very hopeful, and there was a lot of work to do. And so I just jumped in, very young, 24. I didn't know really what I was doing in terms of state building or rebuilding. I was working in the water sector, rebuilding this ministry that literally had been bombed out. And so I threw myself into it so deeply, so passionately. There was such a reward because the Afghan people just could feel your commitment. But I burned out within a year. I didn't know anything about taking care of myself or, any of that. I also didn't know how to build structures and delegate. And so, yes, burnout happens. But now here I am. I'm 40. How old am I? 46. And I'm much better at managing that. So I get a lot of fuel from service work for being in service, but I mostly get fuel with my interactions with people. And so whereas for a lot of people that could be depleting, for me that gets me excited. And obviously talking about these issues gets me really excited.
How did your work internationally inform, frame, or help evolve your ideas of what is happening here in America?
I worked in places that were like semi-democratic, or what I call like fake democracies, where the elections were rigged, or there were oligarchies, there were kleptocracies, which is basically where the person in power is stealing from the government. There's something we call rent seeking, which is like you're just building a system where you can extract resources from the country for your private wealth. So I was working in countries all across the regions that had those situations. The former Soviet Union, it had just come down, a few years before when I went to work there. And so I was working in building civil society. So I really did a deep dive of what is civil society. It's like the third sector in a democracy that helps hold the government accountable. What's the role of press, building that civil society, because they did not have that under the Soviet Union. So really teaching, working with them, giving them small grants, helping them figure that out. Being in the Middle East, I worked a long time virtually, far from a distance, on Iran, which is my parents' birth country, which I knew a lot about and learned a lot more about, which is one of the most complicated, authoritarian, theocratic places. I worked directly with people that were impacted by that every day, and it impacted me deeply, like in my heart and how I see the world, which I think is where a lot of my passion comes from as well.
You're seeing these different forms of government, different forms of democracy, fake democracy, as you say. You come back, did it kind of ask you or force you to examine American democracy a little bit more critically?
Bush was president when I first started, and then Obama, the whole Obama. And so we were bombing Iraq at the time. So going to the Middle East was really hard because they were very angry at us, unanimously so. And so I was constantly walking that line. And then when I came back, it was Obama and Guantanamo still was around, whatever. So yes, I did have to really look at the United States. And then as we started to see the first Trump administration come in, that's when I really started to look domestically. Like, how are things going that the harming of marginalized groups is something people are interested in? You know, how are things going economically? That's when I got really hyper-local.
You get into this hyper-local activist organizing space to help and work with people.
Yes.
Who are your mentors? Who are your idols in doing this work?
So I've really struggled with the concept of idols. People you read about and a lot of people like read a biography. Oh, that's who I want to emulate. Mm-hmm. I have more done better with people in my life that I have really trusted. Those are people that have guided me or have helped grown me. On the Metro Human Relations Commission, when I got on in 2019, Pastor Davy Tucker, also got on at the same time. It was a different commission than it is today. And I grew a lot from him and the folks that were on there. And we also built together. You know what I mean? So it's not like this kind of superiority or looking up type of thing, but in interacting with people as powerful as he is and as high integrity and high value, I grew. There are other people that have come to the surface that are really helpful in my life right now, that are just folks that have lived a long life of struggle and achievement and failing and
Okay, so if you can, give us a valuable piece of advice or an experience you had when you were younger, something that is very clear and super valuable to you now.
I, along the way, developed an ability to go my own way. And there were people along the way that could see that and said, do not worry about what they're saying or not saying or who you're pleasing or not pleasing or what it looks like or what it even feels like inside. If it's the right thing, just keep going. And that was really helpful because I felt very alone sometimes in my convictions to be a young person and to be so consumed with these, because I was very sensitive. I mean, this all comes from feeling these problems deeply. And as a young 20-year-old, something really worried about Afghanistan or really worried about Iraq, you kind of stand out at the frat party or you know what I mean?
Yeah, you do.
And to have older professors, academics, whoever they were, kind of say, I see you, keep going. It's okay that you don't necessarily fit in. It took a while to be able to have that skin where I could stand up and say, y'all don't know who I am, but we're all going to march onto the Capitol right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was a process of just constantly listening to the voices that said, it's okay to be bold and to be courageous and to not be common. That was the advice. It's okay to be bold, courageous, and uncommon.
So this wonderful piece of advice that you were given from folks when you were younger, do you work with young folks now?
I do.
What do you tell them when they come to you with the struggles of their feelings and trying to forge this world that they want to live in, that they want to see?
The most important thing, I think, for young people, especially those that are just pushing and striving or everybody, but especially those that are curious and as hungry for change, I want them to know that they are powerful despite what might feel powerless. And so that's what I will say is like, power is not, a lot of times young people want someone to give them authority. You are now the chief important person.
Yes.
And I keep trying to remind people, and this is important for democratic movements, it's important for our moment, is that no one gives you that. You have to essentially take that for yourself, that you are powerful, and then find the way that you make the impact. And it could be conventional, it could be unconventional, it might be creative, it might not be this title and salary, it might be something else, but you choose whether you are powerful or not. And I'm not talking about the oppressive kind of power, I'm talking about where you are fully locked in to what you want to say and what you're going to do for your community, for your world.
That's beautiful. Now, you started Rise and Shine Tennessee. Take me back to the beginning. What was the inception of the organization?
What I would say was like a crowdsourced protest on March 30th of 2023. And just thousands and thousands of people showed up, and everybody was hungry for like some action afterwards. And organizations came out of that, several of them. And I was getting a lot of messages of like, I want to do this. I want to do this. What do I do? What do I do? And so I was like, I can't do this as a person. This needs an organization. This needs an umbrella, whatever. And so just started a few chat groups, did a Google form of what people were interested in, and then started gathering folks. And there were a lot of incredible volunteers, especially in those early days, that worked their tails off. I mean, I could name off so many people that were just incredible from all over. And then formalized it and kept going and wanted to just make sure that the legislators didn't think that this was a one and done thing, that we were coming back and we were coming back, and we have.
At Rise and Shine, you all say that you are, quote, a down-to-earth, come-as-you-are organization.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yes.
Why stress that approach?
Because I think for activism to last and to be true, it has to be authentic. You have to authentically connect to the thing, and you have to feel what you feel. If you are putting on a mask or if you are doing it for other reasons, it will die inside of you. It will be a phase. Because the truth about this stuff, civic engagement, it's like an evolution of a person's spirit of who they are. It's a part of knowing yourself. It isn't just a task you take on. It's a side of yourself you uncover. That's what has been the most powerful thing, is that transformation that's happened to people. At the beginning, yeah, maybe I knew a little bit more about government or a little bit. Now, folks that have been in there are just as knowledgeable, if not more, following it themselves, got their own groups, doing their own Instagrams. Like, that's powerful. And that's just uncovering a side of yourself that maybe one didn't know was supposed to be understood that way. And I also think the important thing is that civic engagement this way in a community gives a sense of purpose and connection. Sometimes the daily grind can feel very empty, and actually getting engaged in something like this starts to give you more meaning than anything else.
It sounds spiritual to me, almost like a spiritual movement, a spiritual awakening in a sense of people getting together for a cause that they truly, truly believe in and evolving, coming to know themselves a little bit more, right?
Yeah, I think that generally anything that you put effort and energy towards it, to making good, is a growth moment. It is. And I've made so many mistakes, and I've grown a ton, and there's so many things we've done right. And it's risky and it's vulnerable. And I think that's why it leads to people learning more about themselves.
All right, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk with Maryam Abolfazli about growing up in Tennessee. We'll see what it was like for her and what actually led her to run for major office. And we'll find out what that was like as well. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org. Funding for This Is Nashville comes from Burr and Foreman Law Firm, serving clients with transactional, litigation, and regulatory needs. Discovering how each client defines a win and working with them every step of the way to achieve it. Burr.com.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. My guest is Maryam Abolfazli. She's an activist, organizer, nonprofit founder, economic development consultant, author, and mom. Maryam, did I forget anything else?
A Tennessean, Nashvilleian, I don't know.
Podcaster as well. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. All right, let's talk about your early life. You were raised here in Nashville, Tennessee, right?
Born and raised.
Born and raised.
At the time it was called Baptist Hospital.
Why did your parents settle down here in Nashville?
Well, it was 1978. They were working my dad was working for an American company in Iran at the time. He had been educated here. He came here in 1963, fell in love with the United States, was in the Midwest, obsessed with it, worked on a railroad in the summers, lived with a family, a World War II veteran family, got really tight with them, so much so that when Mr. Graham died, they put my father on the tombstone as the fourth brother.
Wow.
Yeah. So just really was one of those people that just soaked in American culture, loved it, and Midwest culture and everything. And so went back to work for an American company. This is before the Islamic Revolution. So the American-Iranian relationship was really good. And then the tide was changing, and it was really clear. And so they decided to come to the United States and check out some of the opportunity with his former roommate in the Midwest, who was also an Iranian guy who was opening up some franchises down here in the South. And Dad was going to come and do some construction for him because he was an engineer, architectural engineer. And so that's why we ended up here. It's usually friends follow friends. And it was 1978. There was martial law in Iran. And yeah, it was probably the most important moment and decision and day of my life, I'd say.
Yeah. Tell me about your folks.
Well, a lot of people got to know them because they were on the road with me quite a bit during the campaign. I learned road tripping from my dad. He loved just jumping in the car and driving across Tennessee or wherever. So we had a lot of fun putting 20,000 miles on my car. They are, Iranian folks in general are very hospitable. That's kind of how they judge themselves and others. is how warm and welcoming, how much you feed folks, how long people stay. You know? So they're very warm, very welcoming. They truly raised me and my sister as powerful women, not in any kind of intentional way, just by who they both are. Dad had me change a toilet when I was a young girl. He had us both, mowing the lawn on the sit mower. Neither of them ever had it where we felt that there was any difference between us and anybody else. Yeah. And so I think that created a lot of sense of agency inside of us. They're funny, they're fun, and they are absolutely obsessed with their grandchildren, I would say.
As good grandparents are.
Yeah.
So the really beautiful, idyllic family life. What was it like growing up in Nashville as you're entering like preteen, teenager years? Nashville
was fun. It was so cozy and it's such a small little town, parochial town. Some parts were hard. My friends up north would laugh at me when I'd say this, but I didn't look like everybody else. And I mean, and that's bizarre to them, but there was a look. There was, a predominant face, and I didn't look like that. And a lot of times people pointed that out. Kids pointed that out. My lunch didn't look or smell like the lunches because my mom made me home cooked meals for lunch, and so I felt different. And it was hard. I was a sensitive kid, and it impacted me quite a bit. But also, like you said, that level of self-doubt turns into a superpower later, much later.
Much later.
But also, Nashvillians were very warm and welcoming of my family and took good care of us. I was running around the neighborhood all afternoon, all the time, to all my neighbors. It was a warm place, but you could feel the difference, and people made you feel that difference.
Yeah, particularly in middle school, high school.
Yes.
Adolescents and teenagers.
So I will say, middle school I was at David Lipscomb, and then in high school I was at Hume Fogg, and that's when things calmed down for me because going to public school, going to magnet public school, the diversity was a lot.
Okay.
And that is when my shoulders kind of relaxed and I got to finally sort of be myself, and people were curious about that part of me as opposed to me just always kind of trying to know about others and fit in with that. This was the first time at Hume Fogg that others were kind of curious about me and I could be that.
A lot of folks, when they want to leave somewhere where they grow up as soon as they can. Was that how you felt? Were you one of those people?
Oh, yes. Nashville felt like 4 square feet. It just felt tiny, 4 by 4 square feet. It was, I just knew about the world. I knew it was big, and I was so ready to get out there. And I did. I went to London for a year of school. I went to Spain to study abroad and learn Spanish. I went to Afghanistan for a year, and then I was spending all that time between D.C. and the region that I was describing earlier. So yeah, I was back and forth quite a bit. The plane to DC is like an hour long, but I was gone for about 20 years and then came back in 2018 to have my son here. So
you wanted to make sure that you had your son here, that he was a native Nashvillian and Tennessean.
I mean, I don't know if I was thinking about that because I oddly, he ended up being born at the same hospital I was, which none of that was in the plan. But it was just an intuition I got once I got pregnant that I didn't want to be in D.C. anymore. I didn't want to raise him in that concrete jungle. I wanted the trees and the sunset and, just the nature and life here in Nashville and to be around my family. So that's what I did.
I imagine your parents were very, very happy with that decision.
Yes.
All right. So in 2020, you write a book. A book is published. Red, it's called. And from what I understand, it's about a mother who has to make a choice to save her daughter or the country from the influence of a, let's say, less than nice president.
Wow.
In reading about it, in many of the reviews, they likened the book to Margaret Atwood's work. Tell me this. Tell me about this book and why you set out to write it.
Oh, my gosh.
Is that something you try to hide from folks?
No, I have not thought about it in so long. I don't know if it's a good book. That's my problem. So I'm really scared. Sometimes when you write a thing or you spend so much time on it, you almost can't even tell, what it is anymore. But I've expressed myself through writing ever since I was a kid. It's how I get through complicated thoughts and feelings. Now I do it a lot in like quick videos on Instagram to try to explain and help. But for a while, it was all through writing. And I was... When I'm impacted by something, and I know this is funny because most people are not impacted emotionally by politics, but I am, I guess, because of how I grew up and the worlds that I grew up in. But yeah, when 2016 happened, I just took to the computer and had to write a story. And I wrote it and I wrote it and I wrote it. I don't know how many drafts a book takes, probably 4 or 5 drafts. And then instead of going the traditional route, because I don't have the attention span for that. I just self-published it in 2020 when we're all kind of stuck at home.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people will believe me, but I had zero idea that I would ever run for any office ever when I wrote that book. Zero.
Okay.
Like literally the book wrote itself. And then, yeah, it's hard for people to believe this, but like literally, even in February of 2024, I didn't know I was running for office.
Wow. I want to ask you about that later. But okay, so you write this book and it just kind of flowed out of you?
Yes. And a lot of writers say that. Yes. It just it's just characters, dialogue, yes, scenes. All from growing up here, because a lot of it's set here. And I wrote it before I had moved back. This is just wild to me. I wrote it before I moved back here. But so much of it is set here. It's almost like I was writing my plan forward.
Why? That's some weird prescience right there. But why set it back here in Nashville?
I don't know. I don't know. I think I understood at the time that the fight in the country, for the country, was in these parts of the country. If I remember correctly, the story is about people migrating back and forth depending on their political leanings or for their safety between Tennessee to California on the southern, like basically it was kind of this caravan back and forth. And that's in the story. And so, and I started the book when I was living in California. So I think I just saw these two different worlds and what ideology, what was leading and what was trailing and who's being harmed by it.
So you got a little bit of this, but what do you think about the book now in 2025 when you reflect on it?
So I got some things right. I got some things wrong. You know what I mean? Now when I think about it in terms of, it got some things right and it was fictional and it was a way for me to express some ideas that were coming to mind and some characters. Yeah, I don't know. Read it and let me know.
I will. Okay, let's move on to last year's run for Congress. A year ago, you did not know you were running for Congress. Mm-mm. It's not an easy task, nor is it an easy decision. So take me to the events that really helped you make that choice. What was going on in your life?
I was spending a lot of time at the state legislature. And I've told this story before, but there was this one day where one of the reps brought a bill that was like, in the case of sexual assault, a woman shouldn't have to carry the child, because it's too traumatizing, it's too difficult. Mm-hmm. And it was the first time I was hearing people on the other side express how they felt about that topic in person. And they were saying things that were like, they clearly don't trust that women make these decisions out of any best interest for the child or for themselves. Like it's all just a big conspiracy of evil women trying to, I don't know what. And it was clear that, I mean, the level of, having my child and the physical aspect of having my child, not even the spiritual one or the financial one or whatever, the physical aspect of actually birthing that child was one of the hardest, biggest things I've ever done in my life. And I've done a lot of things. And to hear them just diminish that to nothing was profound for me. It went in. And I was pretty thick-skinned. I'd been in a lot of those committee meetings. And so I just realized, like, this is big. It's not going anywhere. And the next step to fight this, because it's urgent, is going to have to be elected officials coming to the forefront that change the course of this, like that vote differently on these things. And I wanted to do it at the federal level because I felt like it could have an impact locally, because the states, it was so gerrymandered and so stuck.
Yeah.
And so I literally just thought, look, if it is so dire, if the thinking and the distrust is so big, then we really have to run for office to change things.
What did your family and friends say when you told them about your decision?
My family enjoys a private life and we're very family centered. So disrupting that was not anything anybody was excited about, honestly. I mean, our family is the center of our life, and we spend a lot of time together. So it was similarly to how I was viewing it. It was like, well, if we've got to do this, which is so beautiful, and I'm so grateful to them, because it's kind of like, well, if we've got to do this, we'll do it. And then, then they all just kind of rallied and did what it took, where it was taking care of my kid or, getting on the campaign trail with me, or, I mean, just so much, knocking doors with me. My sister was with me all along, my dad, my mom. And so, it was kind of this a lot in many ways, the kind of how I approach it was like, that wasn't my plan, but it was like this reluctance stepping up. But then when we decide to step up, we're doing it in full force.
A lot of folks don't think about that. When you run for office, even local office, but particularly if you're running for Congress, it's a big magnifying glass put on you, your entire family. How hard is it to balance that constant glare with your regular existence of waking up, taking care of your kid, running a campaign, doing whatever you may be doing for work, being in relation to your family and friends?
I think it helped that I was 46 and not 26 or 36.
How so?
Because I think knowing thyself is really, really key in this, especially magnifying glass stuff. I can't say that I was perfect or impervious to the pressures or what I was hearing about me or all that stuff, because that's hard. But yeah, at least I had developed the skin and the ability to just keep my North Star and keep going day in and day out. It also, the way you got to have ways to ground yourself, like back to normal, back to you're just a human being, you're just a normal person. And my family, my cousins, a good dinner with we have 20, 30 people here.
Okay.
Just all of us. None of them treated me like anything special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just having a meal with them and just being able to be a person at the table and people making fun of me was really helpful, or friends that would allow me a night off and hanging out with them, where I could just be a flawed human being. Those were the things that got me through, for sure, sure. And an incredible team around me. I have to major shout out to, all the Stephen, Michael, Alexis, everybody. They just, when I got a team that really understood me, it was like home.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. My guest is nonprofit founder, activist, author, and native Tennessean Maryam Abolfazli. We're talking about her early life here in Tennessee and her run for Tennessee's 5th congressional district. All right, now, while campaigning, you spoke to a lot of people who held different political views and beliefs and different political priorities than your own. What did you learn from them?
I learned that oftentimes, not all the time, but most of the time, there's a logic behind the way a person feels.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason behind the way they feel. And I don't mean like, okay, I hate immigrants. And then it's like, oh, because they're the worst people. I don't mean that logic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a story, there's an experience, there's some math they've done. And so learning that math, learning that story, learning that logic was really enlightening for me because it helped me understand why people chose a certain way or had an ideology or a philosophy that was different from anything I had been around or understood. It really grew me. It grew me intellectually, and it grew me as a person to be like, oh, well, if you have to be in government, how do you balance these two valid positions on a thing?
Mm-hmm. So these experiences, these conversations inspired you to start this podcast.
Yeah.
Betray Your Algorithm.
Yeah.
Tell us about the podcast and the types of conversations you want to have on Betray Your Algorithm.
Yeah, I think that it is really important for us humans in America to be able to talk to each other. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important for us to be able to talk to each other. We don't have to change our opinions on a thing. We don't have to sell our values down the stream. We don't have to lose our anger or frustration or whatever on a thing. And not everyone can and not everyone should. And I'm not saying that, but I felt like I could and I can and I'm willing to have conversations with folks that think differently than me and push them and then also have them push me.
Mm-hmm.
The algorithm is putting us in bubbles in such it's so bad that I have no idea what people that don't think like me see in their feeds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then someone tells me XYZ is going around and I have no idea because all I see is stuff that's catered to me that just reassures my way of thinking. No one grows that way. No one evolves that way. I don't want to know that the way I think about something is the right way.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know where everyone else is at on that. And so that's what I'm trying to do is like get out of your bubble. If you're willing, I will not be attacking. I'm not looking for gotcha moments, but I want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z and hear how you're explaining it to yourself. And see if you're willing to hear how I'm explaining it.
I got to say that's what I really enjoyed about our conversation. I was able to talk about things that I normally don't talk about in public and express a different point of view and hear your point of view. And from that, as I listened back to it, I sent it to my parents, and my parents were
cool.
like, great job and things, and friends. But as I listened to it, I rarely listen to my own stuff. I listened to it and I was like, okay, Khalil, that makes sense. Oh, hold on, Khalil. You might want to think about that a little bit more.
Right. And another guest had the same thing where they were like, wait, did I say that? Or is that what I think? And I don't want to make people feel bad for being honest on the show. And I'm glad you could just listen to it and move on. But it is kind of like, is that where I'm at on this thing? That doesn't sound so great, or let me deepen my thinking on that.
But that's something we have to do all the time if we can.
If we're willing.
Yes. Being very willing to bust one's own bubble and to betray one's own algorithm. Real quick, before we go to break, do you think you may run again?
He's asking the question. I am open to it. Okay. I'm open to it. I'm working as the organizing director of Stand Up Nashville, and that's what I'm focused on right now, and I'm enjoying it very much, and I'm open to it. All
right. We're going to take one last break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation to learn about what it's like raising a child in the modern world. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. I've been talking this hour with Maryam Abolfazli. She's an activist, author, congressional candidate, nonprofit leader, economic development expert, and mom. Maryam, thanks for being here.
Of course, I love it.
So you have a young son. How old is he?
He is 6, going on 7 very soon.
Tell us about him.
Oh, he's the best. I feel like if anybody remembers that movie Benjamin Button, where the kid is like born as a wise old man, I feel like I was, a wise old man came out of me. He's just been an old soul from the beginning. He's extremely emotionally intelligent and communicative. We have very straightforward conversations with each other about everything. He's a profound child. He understands that he comes from many cultures. He understands his family looks different, and he loves it, which is a blessing, truly. He's a powerful human being.
What's the best part about being a mom?
This is going to sound silly or not. I was thinking, like, who loves them more? Does the child love the parent more, or does the parent love the child more? And I was thinking about him. He was sad that I wasn't at a place, and I was thinking about how he was describing it to me, and I was thinking, for him, I am very big and important in his understanding of himself, in his understanding of his heart, his safety, his comfort, his joy. I am huge. I eclipse most other things in that equation, and that's an immense responsibility, but it is a powerful human experience. It is a deep human experience to be that for somebody, and very, very hard in similar ways, because you're deeply vulnerable and you see all your demons and everything through those eyes. But just I don't think there's a relationship quite like that where you get these moments of realizing I'm a very consequential person to this human being, and that's profound.
Is that also one of the hardest parts about being a mom too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because if you're tired, or if you're down, or if you're distracted, that will take away from their experience in the moment, in the day, in the time, And I'm a single mother, so it's just me and him. So sometimes there's nothing to distract away from mommy,
Yeah. Now, you and I are both Generation Xers.
Yes.
And
proud.
Yes.
Proud of it.
It's the best, actually.
It is
like, people don't know. Like, we have always been the definition of cool. But growing up in our era is vastly different from today.
Yeah.
There were no smartphones, no internet, no social media.
Thank the
and
Lord.
To distract us. And in a sense, we had an innocence to our childhood in some cases. How do you manage to really give your son space for innocence and exploration, but protecting him from the harm of the digital world? I know it's easier right now because he's so young, but in a few years he's going to be a preteen.
I was thinking about that because relationships of kids are more complicated because of social media and the internet. And so it's social media that I want to protect them from, but it's also how kids interact with each other today that I'm concerned about. When I talk to leaders and school leaders and mayors and all this stuff, it was mental health of children was like number one for many people as I talk to them about their concerns. And I think about that a lot as I deal with school shootings or park shootings or wherever. And I was thinking, right now, he and I are extremely tight. We have very deep conversations. He trusts me and my take on the world. He trusts me to share. I try to be very neutral when he is sharing vulnerably about something. It always, I think a lot of parents will relate, it always comes out like at 8:26 when I'm about to pass out, because we've been doing bedtime. And then he tells me this big thing that happened that day, right as he's about to pass out. And those are how I respond to that, I think, is really important. I don't mean to have an outsized sense of how much I can control how he feels about things or me. So I think our relationship is really key, but not in like we're best friends or any of that, or I'm a helicopter mom type of thing, but in terms of he feels that he's confident and strong to go out and explore. And I also am, for better or for worse, someone that's kind of been like, go do it from the beginning. So if we're at the grocery store and he wants a snack, I'll be like, go get it and bring it back to me. And he'll go 3 aisles away and come back. And I mean, you could disagree with that or that style. It sometimes results in some funny things. But, or if we're at a restaurant and he's like, I need ketchup, go ask the person for the person that works there for ketchup. Just teaching him that he can go do it and doing that from the get-go. So he doesn't feel like I'm the person that gets things done for him. He has it in him that he has to go do that for himself.
You're raising a young boy. I'm curious about, like, how are you raising him as a young boy? He's going to be a young man soon enough, and then a grown man. How do you raise him, understanding that the world has different expectations and pitfalls for young boys?
One step at a time, one day at a time. Otherwise, it's humongous. And sometimes if you're like me and you're reading global trends about boys and men in the workplace, boys and men when it comes to marriage, and there's a lot of crises there and that we're seeing the backlash to in hypermasculinity and whatever it might be. If you stay in those trends, you might think every single thing that they're doing is some sort of indication or one or the other. So I also just come down and be present with him and make sure that he's inspired, that he is expressing himself the way that he wants, whether it's physical activity, whether it's sports, whether it's dance, whether it's music, that he is channeling his personhood in healthy, powerful ways that make him know that he is powerful, that he spends time with men that are as multifaceted as that gives him an opportunity to be multifaceted, to really be clear about his story and who he is and where he comes from and how confident I am in that story and who we are, and him seeing me publicly be that and be that in the world and walk that walk and how I treat people, his friends, how we are on the playground. He sees that a lot, and that goes in.
You know, I think with the data, I don't have the exact numbers, but knowing that it's been on the rise for a while, single parenthood, everybody happens to know someone who is a single parent.
Yeah.
Yet there's still a stigma that's attached to it. What do you want folks to know about the realities of being a single parent?
You know, I have it easy in some ways because I have a true village. A lot of my family is just so family-centered that I have so much help with my sister and my parents and stuff. So I'm not bearing the brunt of this all by myself. And a lot of times I don't talk about it, and I wonder if others don't as well. It's such a quiet thing. It's very hard to find a book, a memoir of a single mother because we're so busy, or a child's book where they're being raised by a single parent. You just don't find a lot of that content because we're tired. But I also think about, like, I hold that part very private, and I wonder if I hold it private because it's so hard. It's so hard. You are holding a lot of times, you see me getting vulnerable now, you are holding a lot of times the emotional growth of a human, the physical growth, the making ends meet side of it. And like I said, the being present and joyful side of it. All these expectations you have of yourself and just the basic minimum that you have to do. And I'm a high expectations kind of person, for better or for worse, and it crushes me. Sometimes, I'm not going to lie, it can be crushing and very lonely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All right, last question for you. We talked about a lot, and I really appreciate you being here and your honesty, openness, and candor with us as we talked about certain parts of your life that I'm sure you maybe not have spoken about publicly before.
Yep.
But, as we're moving forward to 2025 and beyond, what do you want to leave listeners with? What message do you want them to carry along with them after they've heard this conversation?
I guess I would say, if you're willing to open the purview of what you can do in this world, the impact you can have on a neighbor or a community member or a child or whatever, more is possible than you imagined. A lot of what's been presented to us, whether it's in social media or in movies or books or whatever, is so limited in terms of what we're capable of as human beings, as Tennesseans, as Nashvillians. We can sometimes feel so daunted by just getting by, just making the mortgage or rent and groceries and everything. The creativity and the vision and the inspiration dies. And then on top of that, if you're concerned, half of us are concerned about what's happening at the federal level, maybe half of us aren't. But if you feel crushed by all that, sometimes that little bit of openness or creativity that it requires to make a change goes away or dies down or dims. I never imagined any of the things that have happened in the last 4 years. Never. I guess maybe I did in that book, but otherwise, funny enough. But so be open to a way and a path that maybe hasn't been demonstrated before you, and trust yourself when you do it.
Maryam Abolfazli is a mom, podcaster, author, activist, nonprofit founder, former congressional candidate, and a Nashvilleian through and through. Maryam, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Khalil. It was fun.
I really appreciate it.
Same.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by yours truly. Directed by yours truly as well. Our technical director and board operators, Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation does not end here. Comment and tell us what you want to hear on the show by leaving us a message at 615-751-2500. You can find us on the socials, Blue Sky, Instagram, and X at This Is Nashville. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.